Okay, let's get into this. Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are taking a long, hard look into a set of sources that outline what happens when a detective's life it just stops being a collection of cases and it starts being a desperate crisis management scenario. We are
Mhm.
diving deep into the experience of Detective Sarah Pribek.
And what's really fascinating here is the level of detail. I mean, the sources give us an almost unbearable level of psychological detail.
Yep.
This isn't just about a missing persons case.
Yeah.
It's a forensic look at a detective's life where her professional duty to uphold the law just violently and completely collides with these deeply buried personal loyalties and some unresolved legal conflicts.
Right.
The central tension here really is how far are you willing to bend the law for the people you love most?
Absolutely. So our mission for this deep dive is to move through this extremely intense period, focusing on, I think, three major threads that are all just twisting around each other. First, you have the initial high-stakes missing persons case of the runaway teen, Ellie Bernhardt.
Then there's the second piece, this devastating, persistent shadow that's cast by the past murder of her partner's daughter, Camaraya.
And finally, the big one, the really bewildering, confusing disappearance of Prebek's own husband, Detective Mike Shiloh.
And the material, it feels almost custom tailored to reveal the ethical fallout, the mess that happens when you try to be both a friend and an officer in situations of just extreme trauma. You're going to see how one seemingly minor decision Prebeck made years ago comes back to wreck not only her partner's life, but also her own.
And it forces her to make these compromises.
Exactly. Compromises that just fundamentally change who she is. This is a story that is absolutely defined by its moral gray area.
So let's start at the beginning. We kick off with a case that feels like, a standard missing persons report, but it very, very quickly spirals into something much more intense.
It really does.
We start with a search for 14-year-old Ellie Bernhardt, a runaway from Thief River Falls, who, the family believes, has made her way down to Minneapolis.
And the information, it's brought in by Ellie's older sister, Ainsley Carter. The sources, they paint a very specific picture of Ainsley. She's, 21 or maybe 22,
Right.
described as a nervous beauty. She's dressed casually, jeans and a softball shirt. But Prebeck specifically notes this small diamond solitaire just shining on her left hand.
So she's engaged. There's a future there. But she's completely wrapped up in this present crisis.
You can feel it. Ainsley is clearly anxious, but she's also, trying desperately to maintain composure. This is not a casual interaction for her. The worry is just, it's palpable.
And Ainsley's description of why Ellie ran away, it's
Yeah.
just so heartbreakingly specific to that dynamic of early adolescence.
Oh, yeah.
Ellie had gone through this really rapid physical transformation. Ainsley describes her as having suddenly gotten so pretty within the last year, which of course coincided with her entering junior high.
And that sudden shift, according to Ainsley, led to immediate social isolation and just this intense focus from her peers.
The cruel reality of middle school.
Exactly. It's the worst. Ainsley believes the attention was almost predatory. She explains that other girls felt differently about her, just like the guys did.
And she points out that Ellie packed only the non-school necessities in a large book bag. But the most telling item that was missing, what was it?
A picture of her deceased mother, who had died 6 years prior. And that suggests the flight wasn't random at all. It was fueled by this profound grief and a real emotional vulnerability.
So Prebeck immediately handles this with, the necessary professional caution, but also with this immense sensitivity. She knows she has to rule out the darkest possibilities.
Of course.
So she carefully questions Ainsley about the father-daughter relationship. She asks if Ainsley ever felt anything was not right.
And Ainsley's reaction is it's definitive. She immediately, almost violently denies any suggestion of abuse or inappropriate behavior. She assures Prebeck that her father was protective, maybe even a little overly strict.
And that's a crucial denial, isn't it?
It is, because it shifts Prebeck's focus away from any kind of familial abuse and puts it right back onto the social pressure and the internal crisis this girl is obviously facing.
But that social pressure, it's tied to some really uncomfortable details that Ainsley reluctantly provides. After speaking with Ellie's classmates, Ainsley admits there were these rumors circulating that Ellie was sexually active.
Which is just awful. Ainsley defends her sister. She points out that Ellie didn't even date, which makes the rumors particularly malicious.
And this anxiety about early sexual activity, it seems to feed Ainsley's own speculation about how the family environment might have contributed.
Right, she mentions the dad's all-girls parties that might have, secretly transitioned into mixed-sex sleepovers. It just highlights this gap in parental supervision.
And a really profound anxiety about the vulnerability of a teen who had already lost her most critical female role model, her mother.
Exactly. And this is where the case just explodes. It goes from a standard investigation into a full-blown crisis. Pribek receives a jumper call from Officer Moore and Officer Vanille.
And she realizes almost instantly that the description matches Ellie.
She has to.
So Pribek rushes to the scene, and she finds a slender girl with dark gold hair flashing in the sun, perched on the framework of a train bridge.
And this is the moment where Prebek's two roles, the detached professional and the empathetic protector, they just violently merge.
Yes.
Pribek recognizes the girl instantly, and she notes she's wearing a basic gray t-shirt and black jeans. The sources say it was the antithesis of girl stuff.
So she tries to make a connection. She mentions that Ainsley is in town, trying to give Ellie a reason, any reason, to come back down.
But Ellie is she's beyond that. In her despair, or maybe her rage, she dismisses her. She asks who Pribek is talking to and demands, "For you, some cop in Minneapolis."
And then the unbelievable happens. I mean, the source describes this shocking sudden act. Ellie just jumps straight into the churning waters of the Mississippi River.
And this is that critical moment we mentioned earlier. This is Prebek's ethical Rubicon. She does not hesitate.
Not for a second.
She sheds her jacket. She doesn't think about protocol. She doesn't think about her own safety. She jumps immediately in after the girl. The source notes she didn't even remember thinking anything between the girl letting go and Pribek hitting the water.
And the reality of that jump, even in June, is just brutal. Pribek describes the impact as so jarring I bit my tongue, drawing blood.
And the river, it's cold. But more importantly, it's nothing like a controlled environment, like a pool. She notes it's so different from the tame, cool, chlorinated waters of the lap pool, and it just reduces her to struggling like someone who had forgotten how to swim.
Her anxiety just skyrockets. The current is so powerful, it's carrying both of them rapidly toward the center of the river.
And the geography is completely against them. They are rapidly approaching the spillway, the lock, and dam near the Stone Arch Bridge.
Which is an area notorious for drownings.
Yes, where survival is described in the sources as a total fluke. A complete accident if you make it out.
The sources confirm it was pure, terrifying coincidence that she even bumped into Ellie, who was motionless at this point, maybe knocked out or just in shock.
And she manages to grab her.
She does. But then comes this horrifying realization. She is not a strong enough swimmer to save both of them long-term in that violent current. She is desperately kicking just to keep Ellie's face above the water, hanging on for dear life until help arrives.
And that action, that immediate, non-protocol, highly emotional dive into danger, it really sets the theme for Prebek's entire subsequent crisis. She almost died to save a total stranger.
It's a huge signal.
It signals to you, the listener, and to her colleagues that she is a detective who is willing to prioritize a life over the rule book, and that's a tendency that will define her fatal involvement in the crises involving Genevieve and Shiloh.
The aftermath, of course, reflects the physical trauma of it all. They're both taken to Hennepin County Medical Center. Pribek is suffering clear physical effects. She notes the numbness in the skin of her upper arms and chest, a sure sign of near hypothermia.
And she resists a full medical exam. She just chooses instead to take a blistering hot shower, and she emerges in these borrowed nurse's scrubs, a flowered top, and sea green pants. It's like a temporary shield from her professional identity.
Ellie. Thankfully, she's stabilized and transferred to the crisis unit, the psychiatric ward for observation, and a chest x-ray. Ainsley Carter arrives, and the gesture of gratitude is just simple but profound. She gives Pribek a sincere hug and thanks her. It validates the dangerous risk Pribek took.
But inside the department, the noise is immediate. Detective John Vang, a colleague, confirms the incident caused a serious stir, and he summarizes the department's reaction perfectly. He just says, "I heard something pretty strange about you this morning."
Yeah, Pribek is already flagged internally as an investigator who doesn't color within the lines.
And that high-risk emotional action, it immediately brings us to the devastating professional history that really underlies Pribek's ethical framework. The trauma of her partner, Detective Genevieve Brown, and the murder of her daughter, Camaraya. This past tragedy isn't just background information, it's the root cause of the crisis to come.
Pribek and Genevieve, they shared a deep, almost familial friendship beyond just their partnership. Genevieve was in an interracial marriage to a law student, and their daughter, Camarilla, was only 16.
A promising intellectual girl, a poet who had applied early to Spelman, just had her whole life ahead of her.
And the tragedy was just horrific. Camarilla died of massive internal bleeding after being attacked in a neighbor's house. The attacker was identified as Royce Stewart, a 25-year-old laborer from downstate.
Known by his pervasive nickname, Shorty. It was even on his license plate, Shorty.
And Genevieve had confided in Pribek that Camarilla found Shorty deeply unsettling. She observed that he was always watching me. Just creepy.
So the police built the case against Stewart, but it was fragile. I mean, really fragile. It rested almost entirely on one piece of testimony.
Which was Camarilla's identification in the back of the ambulance, where she managed to whisper, "It was Shorty." And Pribek was there.
She had rushed to the scene because Genevieve was too hysterical to function as a mother, let alone an officer.
And this is where we need to do a real legal deep dive. We have to talk about the concept of the dying declaration.
Right. For you listening, this is a crucial exception to the rule against hearsay in court. It allows a statement made by someone who is, unavailable, in this case, dead, to be admissible.
But there's a catch.
A huge one. The statement has to concern the cause or circumstances of what the person believed to be their impending death.
The operative word there is believed. And the defense lawyer for Stewart, a woman named Jackie Kowalski, she knew this was the weak point.
She went right for it. At the pretrial hearing, Kowalski zeroed in on Pribek's actions. Pribek wasn't acting as a detached police officer trying to secure a statement.
No, she was acting as a surrogate mother. She was trying to comfort her partner's dying child.
And Pribek admitted it under oath. She confessed to making comforting statements, specifically saying, "You'll be all right," at least once, maybe even twice.
A completely human thing to do.
A completely human thing to do that destroyed the case. Kowalski argued that by offering those reassurances, Pribek inadvertently negated the legal requirement. If a police officer tells the victim they will be fine, how can the court prove the victim knew death was imminent?
The implication is just massive. Pribek was trying to soothe the teenager in her last moments, driven by emotion and loyalty to Genevieve. But that very act of comfort utterly destroyed the state's case.
The prosecutor, a guy named Killander, he was watching Pribek testify, and he recognized immediately that the entire case was just falling apart.
And when the judge threw out the statement, the rest of the shaky evidence against Stewart just collapsed.
The result? Roy Stewart walked free. The only penalty he faced was the loss of his driver's license for an entirely unrelated DWI offense.
Unbelievable.
That injustice, that complete failure of the system because of a moment of human kindness, that is the trauma that defines Genevieve's descent.
And what followed was just catastrophic for Genevieve. She took an indefinite leave, retreating to the emotional safety of her sister, Deborah Lowe's farmhouse south of Mankato.
And when Pribek visits, she finds a partner she barely recognizes.
The description of Genevieve's state is harrowing. She's nearly catatonic. She's drinking scotch constantly and hiding the bottles.
And perhaps most tellingly, she is just watching televised sports, something she had absolutely zero interest in before Camarilla's death. It's a sign that she is seeking complete oblivion, a total distraction from the reality of her grief.
The grief, it focuses so sharply on the loss of her only child. She tells Pribek in this devastating moment of emotional advice, she says, "Don't just have one child. If you have just one child and you lose her, it's too much."
Just gut-wrenching. But interestingly, her sister Deborah offers a kind of moral absolution for Pribek. Deborah recognizes the impossible bind Pribek was in. She points out that for Pribek to have handled it right from a purely legal police standpoint, she would have had to tell Camarilla she was going to die.
No friend, no human being could have done that to a 16-year-old girl.
No. And this external perspective, it sort of validates the moral choice Pribek made, even if it destroyed the case legally.
But the trauma, it calcifies. It transitions from grief into this singular, obsessive focus on vengeance. Genevieve later rants about Shorty, who is known to hang out at a bar every night in Blue Earth just downstate.
And she bitterly questions how a guy like that even have any friends. The fact that her daughter's killer is living freely, predictably, and within striking distance, it's an unbearable existential weight for her.
And as Pribek is navigating this profound trauma of her partner, her own foundation begins to shake violently.
This leads us right to her husband, Detective Mike Shiloh. Shiloh is described as tall, lean, with these striking Eurasian features and reserved, almost hard-to-read lynx eyes. A man of quiet intensity.
They're married, and their future seemed, completely set in stone. Shiloh had just been accepted into the highly prestigious FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. It's a 16-week program.
And the plan was for Pribek to follow him once he was settled. It was a major career step for a former narcotics detective.
And his commitment to this future, it was demonstrated materially. He had just sold his beloved first car, a 1968 Pontiac Catalina, because he didn't trust it to get me all the way to Virginia.
He was planning to fly. He was ensuring a stable, structured departure for his next chapter. All the logistics were in place.
And yet, upon returning from her fraught visit to the catatonic Genevieve, Pribek's stability is just obliterated. She gets a truly shocking voicemail on Tuesday morning.
It's Kim from the Quantico training unit. She calls and states that Shiloh's class had already been sworn in, and he had not arrived. He was officially absent.
The shift is so immediate. One moment, Pribek is closing out a mundane case. This woman, Annette Thornton, tired of being married, run away. They tracked easily via gas card and ATM hits eastward.
And the next, her own husband is the subject of her investigation.
Her immediate actions are just pure procedural panic. She rushes to the airport, she faxes hospitals, calls cab companies, requests immediate financial and phone records. All of it.
And she files the report, but she's battling the reality of the situation against the rules she knows. Genevieve had taught her the missing person's litmus test.
Right.
The first 24 to 36 hours are key, but typically for vulnerable populations, children, or women with suspicious circumstances like an ex-boyfriend or signs of a struggle.
None of which apply to a trained former narcotics detective.
Not at all. So she performs the familiar intimate checks, the famous toothbrush test. She goes to the medicine chest and confirms Shiloh's toothbrush is missing.
Which suggests a planned, self-directed absence exceeding 24 hours. A sign of intention.
But then, the crucial misdirection. She finds his time-worn hard-shell valise, the one she thought he had taken to the airport, and it is packed.
Including his shaving kit and the missing toothbrush.
Exactly, and it's pushed under the bed, confirming that while he intended to leave for Quantico, he either never made it to the airport or he changed his mind completely after packing.
So the neighborhood search begins, and it starts to yield these faint, contradictory clues. She speaks to Mrs. Muzio, the elderly, senile neighbor he looked out for.
And Mrs. Muzio confirms seeing Shiloh walking on Saturday, the day of his flight, and she notes he looked angry, which completely contradicts the organized departure plan.
She also has this hostile encounter with Daryl Hawkins, the dog owner Shiloh, frequently clashed with overchain and neglect issues. Hawkins, always resentful of Shiloh's authority, just confirms Shiloh is gone.
The last known contact is at the Kanoko Mini-Mart. Ibrahim, the clerk, remembers Shiloh clearly. He says he was in on Saturday around noon or 1 p.m. buying 2 sandwiches, an apple, and water.
A perfectly routine travel stop.
Totally. When asked how he was, Shiloh just replied, "Fine, thanks." The complete normalcy of this last sighting just amplifies the mystery of his subsequent vanishing act.
And amid all this, the search for her husband, Pribek faces a deeply unsettling professional obligation. Frank Rosella, the forensic assistant at the Annie's office, calls her. He forces her to identify a John Doe.
A Caucasian male, 72 inches tall, who died from a shotgun blast to the face. The body is unidentifiable by features or prints due to the nature of the injury and the exposure.
A moment of just pure dread.
Yeah.
Shiloh was 74 inches. It's close enough to trigger the worst fears.
She has to approach the body. And the relief doesn't come from any standard procedure. It comes from a deeply intimate detail. She manages to sit on her heels, look closely, and confirms the body lacks a very specific, prominent scar on Shiloh's right palm.
That scar, the sources confirmed, was a deep gash left by this cold case fugitive, Annalise Elliott, from an incident years ago. It's a painful physical reminder of Shiloh's history as a cop.
And the absence of that scar saves her from the worst news. But the experience, it just reinforces the terrifying reality of his potential fate.
But the immediate relief is countered by professional judgment. Pribek realizes immediately that her colleagues, specifically Vang and Lieutenant Prewitt, they just assume Shiloh simply left her in the job.
They're adhering to that cynical, grown men rarely go missing rule, meaning they disappear because they want to, usually to escape debt, entanglements, or, in this case, a marriage.
So Pribek is now not just searching for her husband, she is facing the professional stigma of being the abandoned spouse of a rogue cop.
And Pribek realizes she can't rely on the department for this. The investigation into Shiloh has to be personal, and it forces her to confront secrets she never knew existed.
So she makes the first move. She calls Genevieve, asking for a candid photo of Shiloh from Camrea's old Christmas candid shots. She knows the official department photos won't capture the humanity she needs for a missing persons search.
And this decision, it sends her far beyond Minneapolis, all the way to Utah to confront Shiloh's estranged, fundamentalist family.
There she speaks to his pregnant sister, Naomi Wilson, and his brother, Bill, and they reveal a deeply buried family history. Shiloh had a deaf sister, Sinclair, who was estranged and had adopted their grandmother's maiden name, Sinclair Goldman, and had become a published poet.
The narrative of their family estrangement is so key to understanding Shiloh's personality. Bill explains that their father was an evangelical winner of souls whose entire life was governed by these extreme conservative religious rules.
And the family break? It happened on Christmas night when the father caught Shiloh sneaking Sinclair into the house.
The official family story was that Shiloh was doing drugs, but Bill firmly believes the father was far more concerned about the profound moral and spiritual transgression, the immorality of the act, and the break with religious rules.
Bill describes their father worrying only about the health of the soul. The punishment was these long, painful theological conversations, not physical abuse. And this environment, it just explains Shiloh's later profound need for atonement.
And Bill provides stunning insight into Shiloh's inherent recklessness. He recounts Shiloh's totally fearless nature, including jumping freight trains for kicks in his youth.
An action that seems random now, but which will become critically important in the final confrontation.
Oh, absolutely. And even more bizarrely, Bill mentions Shiloh's dabbling in illegal snake handling practices years ago. This detail, it's drawn from a literal interpretation of the Gospel of Mark.
The one about they will pick up serpents, and if they drink any deadly thing, it will not hurt them.
That's the one. It just underscores Shiloh's intense high-risk personality and his desperate need to prove his faith, or his lack of it, through radical, dangerous action. He is clearly a man who lives on the edge, constantly seeking to test limits and face danger.
This intense history, it propels Pribek to New Mexico to find Sinclair Goldman, now a poet and teacher at Bale College. And speaking through a translator, Ligeia, a creative writing student who knew sign language Sinclair, confirms the profound bond she shared with Shiloh.
Sinclair describes their relationship as being based on mutual apostasy, a shared rejection of their restrictive upbringing. They were providing oxygen in the air for each other. They were each other's only lifeline in a suffocating environment.
But then Sinclair drops the final, devastating piece of the puzzle. She speaks of having a very brief, very wrong affair that ended around the time Pribek met Shiloh 5 years prior.
And this is the moment where Pribek, finally connecting all the fragments, Shiloh's guardedness, his occasional deep distress, the emotional intensity, she realizes the full truth.
The source confirms Pribek's realization. The wrong affair was with Shiloh himself. It was a profound emotional entanglement with his sister, born of their shared trauma and isolation.
And that explained the lingering sadness and turmoil Shiloh carried when Pribek first entered his life. He was distraught because he was breaking away from this foundational yet completely forbidden relationship.
Before leaving, Sinclair gives Pribek an unmarked, sealed envelope, separate from her personal letter, which Pribek just tucks away, still reeling from the revelation. But the most critical piece of evidence is logistical.
Yes. Pribek returns to Minnesota, and she finds the 7-digit phone number Shiloh had scrawled on his plane ticket, which was tucked inside his poetry book.
A significant detail. It shows he valued this contact more than his impending future at Quantico.
Absolutely. So she dials the number, adding Minnesota area codes, and it connects her to a dive bar called Sportsman.
The location is Blue Earth, Minnesota, and the blood just runs cold. Blue Earth is the exact downstate town where Ray Stewart Camarea's killer, Shorty, is known to hang out every single night.
The convergence is sudden, terrifying, and absolute.
And the final confirmation arrives moments later. Genevieve calls Pribek with news from the department. Shorty had stolen a pickup truck from an old man in the untracked parking lot, a truck that was later found smashed up.
And Pribek finally understands the whole picture.
Shiloh didn't run away from his life. He abandoned it. He reverted to his reckless youth by jumping a freight train, the way Bill said he traveled for kicks, to get down to Blue Earth.
And he stole the truck not for transport, but, as Pribek now suspects, as an unregistered weapon of vengeance, intended to murder the man who the law had let go free.
The discovery that her missing husband is not a victim, but an attempted murderer seeking revenge, it leaves Pribek with no choice but to take action. She drives immediately to Blue Earth.
And she finds Royce Stewart at the sportsman bar.
She confronts him directly, flashing her badge, forcing his drinking buddies away. She tries to intimidate him with a fake warrant, pushing him to admit he knows where Shiloh is.
But Shorty is cagey and hostile. He tells her he knows jack shit and denies any knowledge of her husband.
And this failure, it confirms Pribek's decision to abandon protocol. The law failed Camarena, and the law has no interest in finding a rogue cop who decided to leave his life.
So she drives off, but she is only justifying a decision she has already made. She's reflecting on the roadside that she was simply justifying a decision I'd already made.
She returns late that night to Shorty's house, which is actually a large ramshackle garden shed behind a farmhouse.
Yeah.
She cuts her headlights and begins to break in, fully committed to an illegal search.
But the internal tension is shattered immediately. She steps inside and realizes she's been ambushed not by Shorty, but by Genevieve.
Genevieve was waiting for you.
The shift in her partner is jarring. Genevieve's earlier catatonic grief is gone. It's been replaced by this cold, revitalized purpose.
And Genevieve holds up the undeniable proof. Michael David Shiloh's driver's license. With a holographic seal, Shiloh had been here. He lost his identification in the struggle or the crash.
The reconstruction is complete. Shiloh jumped the train, stole the truck, drove here, and planned murder.
This scene just explodes when Shorty returns home on foot from the bar. Pribek manages to blindside him, hitting him in the solar plexus. But before Pribek can restrain him, Genevieve acts with swift, chilling finality.
She uses the wallpaper blade she was holding and she slices his throat.
It is a shocking, sudden, and complete act of revenge. Pribek immediately orders her to call 911. It's an automatic, professional response.
But Genevieve ignores her. She's focusing solely on the cover-up. She points out there's no phone and calmly states their impossible situation. If Shorty died and we covered our tracks, we were all right.
The implication is clear. Genevieve has crossed the line, and she is pulling Pribek across with her.
And Pribek, realizing Genevieve has committed murder and is fully committed to the cover-up, she sits with the dying Shorty. She forces him to give a true account of what happened.
This is a real, effective dying declaration, sought not by the law, but by a cop desperate to understand her husband's fate.
And Shorty, fading, admits that Shiloh was indeed laying for me, driving a big Ford pickup without lights, and then intentionally turning on his headlights and driving real fucking fast on the wrong side of the road.
Shiloh's intent was unequivocally murderous.
But Shorty clarifies the crucial distinction, a detail that will later save Shiloh from the murder charge. Shorty confirms Shiloh intentionally tried to run him down, but Shorty was already on the ground, having slipped on ice.
So Shiloh lost control because he pulled out at the last minute. A moment of weakness or second thought, he crashed the truck.
Yes, Shorty states. He lost control because he pulled out at the last minute. It was two different things. Shiloh drove away, bleeding, likely believing he had succeeded, but Shorty was only injured, not dead.
After Shorty dies, Genevieve's descent into cold calculation is complete. She decides to torch the crime scene, using gasoline, ensuring nothing links them to the shed.
And Pribek notes the utterly chilling detail that Genevieve all but whistled as she torched the crime scene, indicating a profound sense of satisfaction and relief that her trauma has finally been avenged, regardless of the ethical cost.
They immediately escape back to the Lowe's house, fabricating a story that relies on plausible details. Pribek visited the bar, couldn't find Shiloh, and then drove straight up to Mankato to meet Genevieve.
And the phone records showing Pribek, called Genevieve, provide the cover they need. They are now officially conspirators in murder and arson.
The narrative takes its final, bizarre twist the very next morning. The missing person case, a Detective Mike Shiloh, resolves itself when he walks into a police station in Mason City, Iowa, and turns himself in.
And he confesses to the murder of Royce Stewart.
This is the legal paradox. We know Shiloh didn't commit the murder, Genevieve did. However, the police psychologist determines that Shiloh was suffering from retrograde amnesia caused by the severe head trauma of the truck wreck.
Let's unpack that for a second. Retrograde amnesia in this context is the loss of memory of events that happened before the injury.
Right, because Shiloh had mentally rehearsed the murder scenario, stealing the truck, driving without lights, running Shorty down. The trauma of the actual crash caused the intensely rehearsed fiction to merge with his actual memory of the failed attempt.
He genuinely psychologically believed he had succeeded in killing Shorty.
The irony is just rich. Shiloh's severe physical injuries from the crash, which Pribek knows about, helped the investigating detectives rule out the possibility that he returned later to kill Shorty.
So he is charged not with murder, which he confessed to, but with auto theft, as his actions are explained away by a medical condition.
But Shiloh rejects this convenient medical defense. He refuses to allow his lawyer to challenge the confession process based on his head injury. He insists he wants to atone for what he did.
And he's not talking about the murder he confessed to. He means for giving in to the murderous impulses and failing to achieve the vengeance he sought for Camarena.
This need for punishment connects directly back to his fundamentalist, high-stakes past. Shiloh is a man who needed radical action to settle spiritual accounts.
He accepts the stiff sentence of 22 months for a first offense of auto theft. He's subsequently transferred to a prison in Wisconsin due to significant safety concerns related to the numerous felons he previously busted as a narcotics detective.
Pribek visits him in prison, and this is the moment for her to resolve the final deep secret that complicated their entire relationship. She finally reveals she knows the truth about Sinclair, the sister.
A painful, intimate conversation. Pribek confronts him with the reality that the very brief, very wrong affair that occurred just days before they met was with his sister. She had been left in turmoil by this realization, feeling that Shiloh's deep emotional core had always been preoccupied.
And the raw vulnerability just surfaces. Pribek states the most difficult thing for her to reconcile. She says, "I could never have measured up."
She believes his enduring emotional complexity stemming from that forbidden bond with Sinclair meant she was always second best.
And Shiloh vehemently denies this interpretation, but the emotional intensity causes the prison guards to intervene, pulling him away, leaving the question unresolved but fully exposed.
Returning to Minneapolis, Pribek finds that the systemic rot within law enforcement continues unabated. Detective Vang confirms a piece of internal corruption. Frank Rosella, the forensic assistant who forced Pribek to view the John Doe, who we now know was not Shiloh, was actually the culprit behind the sick joke phone calls being made to cop wives.
A severe breach of ethics and trust within the department, showing the corruption runs deeper than just ignoring procedure.
But the largest, most existential threat is personal and directed at her. Pribek has a final, chilling meeting with prosecutor Christian Killander near the Government Center fountain.
Killander, the same man who watched the Camarena case collapse, reveals that arson investigators are now looking very closely into Stewart's death.
He knows something is wrong, and he delivers the brutal political truth about the investigation. Stewart's friends told police that a very tall woman cop in a Kalispell search and rescue t-shirt, Shiloh's shirt, which Pribek was wearing at the bar, came asking questions just before Shorty died.
Killander lays out the political reality of the cover-up. Genevieve's a well-liked, respected veteran. She is currently AWOL at her sister's farm, making her legally difficult to extradite and prosecute.
But Pribek, on the other hand, is the tainted spouse of a rogue cop who has been flagged for non-protocol behavior, the river jump.
The implication is clear and terrifying. Killander suggests the administrative jurymen might decide that the professional and administrative burden of Stewart's death should fall on Pribek.
She's the easier, politically convenient target. Pribek faces not only the loss of her husband to a prison sentence, but potentially facing charges for a murder committed by her partner, all because of loyalty and proximity.
This entire deep dive, it just reveals the intricate and often horrifying nature of justice when it is filtered through profound emotional trauma and self-interest. You have to consider the three main characters. Shiloh escaped a murder charge due to a medically convenient explanation, yet he accepted imprisonment for auto theft because he needed spiritual atonement.
And Genevieve, driven by unbearable vengeance, she committed murder and arson, yet she may walk free due to her reputation and strategic absence.
And Pribek, the investigator who started this whole thing trying to save a runaway girl, ends up carrying the professional and legal risk for her partner's actions. She's implicated simply due to her loyalty and her appearance at the crime scene. The law, as these sources show, it's not applied equally or rationally. It is profoundly shaped by reputation, by vengeance, and the circumstances of the cover-up.
It raises a powerful, unavoidable question for you, the listener, as you synthesize these facts. Shiloh desired punishment, Genevieve sought revenge and oblivion, and Pribek found herself implicated in both. When seeking justice for one person, for Camarena, what are the unforgivable ethical costs, and can loyalty ever justify murder?
We'll leave you to wrestle with that one and consider the terrifying reality of what happens when the people sworn to uphold the law decide the system has failed too many times. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.